I guess I'm hosting.
Welcome to Racism is Real, where we tackle the urgent realities of racism in our society. In this series, we explore the systems of oppression that continue to harm marginalized communities and the movements working to create change. Through powerful conversations with activists, educators, and thought leaders, we aim to uncover the truth and take steps towards justice.
Hey, everybody, welcome to Racism is Real. My name is Tanya Fuel, and I'm so excited about the guest that we have joining us today. Today's topic is an interesting one that you might not know that much about, but you think you do. We're talking about racism in sports. It's more than just a game. Welcome to our guest. Go ahead and take a moment and introduce yourselves.
My name is Edwin Powell. Greetings. Thank you for having me on, Tanya. I have many hats, but I guess the hat I'm going to be wearing tonight is my podcasting hat. I am the purveyor of the Hawks Beat podcast. We are an NBA credentialed media outlet that covers the Atlanta Hawks. We are entering our 12th season, and it's been awesome to cover the Hawks, and I'm glad to be here. And I think that's about it. Did I miss anything, Tanya?
No, I think you got it all. Love it. Tulani, introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Tulani Moore. I am an anti-racism educator organizer, and I've been doing that for almost 30 years. I've continued to work as a peace educator as well, with a focus on identity-based conflict. I work with an organization called Urban Peace Builders, and I love that. But we just moved here, so that work is on hold for a while. If you could see my background, you could see that I just moved in, and there's a whole bunch of stuff behind me. So we're trying to hide the evidence of that. Some of y'all have moved before, so you know how it is. I'm also on my janky laptop because I can't find my other stuff. So I'm going to ask y'all to be patient with me as you see my lips move, but then hear my words come a little bit behind that.
No worries. That's completely fair. I'm excited to bring to the stage our host today, who is going to come and share who he is. My name is Tanya Fuel. I currently reside in Florida. I'm the CEO and founder of Bridge Every Gap, a nonprofit mission-driven organization that focuses on community wellness and growth, with an emphasis on youth and women of color. Go ahead and welcome to the stage. We have a young person who is going to be hosting us this evening. And go ahead and introduce yourself, Mr. Eves.
Hi, everybody. My name is James Eves. I am a rising junior physical education major from the illustrious Tuskegee University. I wanted to thank you all for having me today and to be your host. It is such an honor and a pleasure to be here, and I hope to get to know you guys really well. Thank you.
All right, James, you ready to take us away with the first question?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, let's go.
Um, first question. How has athletes historically used their platforms to address racism?
I'm gonna yield to my elder right there because I'm very interested to hear what he has to say.
Okay. The challenge for athletes, especially athletes of the global majority, some people would say non-white, but athletes of the global majority, Black, Indigenous, Asian, people of color. And if we're focusing specifically in the United States, we've had instances all the way from the time so-called Abner Doubleday started baseball and only allowed white players, right? They started these leagues that only allowed white players. And everybody knows, well, not everybody, but a lot of people know that Black people and other people were playing sports as well. And so one of the ways they dealt with it in those days was to start their own leagues. You won't let me play with you, so I'll start my own league. So the Negro League was started. African Americans started a hockey league as well. Not a lot of people know that, but white people wouldn't let you play hockey with them. African Americans started a hockey league, and as a matter of fact, a lot of the moves that hockey players use were actually invented by these young Black hockey players. So we've seen ourselves all over sports when those who had control over access, and that's what racism is about. Racism is about controlling access. It's never been about who's good. It's never been about who's better. It's always been about who has control of access to whatever league they're in or whatever they're doing. And since white males had absolute control over who would be allowed to play, we had situations like the few that I just named. There are tons more.
What came to mind when I thought about everything you were saying was more specifically around those times of the 60s and 70s. And I think about that iconic picture of Muhammad Ali, and he's surrounded by athletes of every genre. He's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jim Brown, and they all surrounded him, when he was going through his thing of, whether he was going to go to the war, he was about to lose his championship belt. Like, that was a historical moment. And back then, you almost had to be together if you're a Black athlete. And I think that when you look at today's athletes that are millionaires on top of millionaires, they're standing on the shoulders of these men on the 60s and 70s who made decisions that were not comfortable and that cost them, frankly, a lot of money. And so I think if you're looking for a historical standpoint, that's where you have to start. You got to start at the roots. And for me, that's where I look. That's kind of where I start, with the Muhammad Alis and the Jim Browns and all of those guys of the like, who made very unpopular standings so that these present guys can have, the quasi freedom of what they do in the sports industry. So, yeah, I love that prospect that you brought.
Well, I'm glad that you said. I'm sorry.
When he took the stand of taking a knee during the national anthem, like, how are those things really finding themselves historically, but now showing up in present day?
Well, I think with the Kaepernick situation, you saw, again, like, that was very unpopular. It was very unpopular. It not only cost him his money, like, it cost him his livelihood, because he didn't play another down after that, And a lot of athletes make that decision that, well, you know what, maybe I just better keep my mouth shut. And, I'm not judging anything, but it's not often easy to stand up against something as large as an institution of racism, But I think ultimately, when you look towards the grand scheme of things, I think that it's still, you have to stand for something, and Colin made that choice, and it cost him what it cost him. But I think ultimately he did the right thing, because that was what he felt he needed to do.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Muhammad Ali and Colin Kaepernick, because we see two men who took a stand, right? And I don't think Colin Kaepernick actually expected the backlash that he got, right? Because that was at a time when not just in sports, but the world was looking at this issue of police brutality, right? And the murder of Black people. So the entire world was looking at that. There were protests going on in countries all over the world about the assassination, torture, and murder of George Floyd, because that video traumatized us. That video traumatized everybody who looked at it, because we are not used to watching somebody get killed. We're just not used to seeing that. So I think Colin Kaepernick was responding to Colin Kaepernick but janky laptop. Colin Kaepernick was responding to what was going on in popular culture at the time, and contrast that with people like Michael Jordan. Love Michael Jordan, the GOAT, right? Greatest of all time. Some people, arguably, let's say that. But Michael Jordan made a very different decision. You know, when Michael Jordan had the opportunity to speak out about racism in the NBA, he made a clear decision to not, because it would cost him money. His statement was, he was talking about Republicans. He said, "Well, Republicans buy sneakers too." So he was thinking about sneaker sales. So not everybody has the same passion, and not everybody can take a significant stand. Everybody's got to judge for themselves what they can and what they can't do. So there are athletes who want to take a stand, but can't, for whatever the reason is.
I like that you said that, because I think it is a choice. And as people of color, we see many different sides of it. We're allowed to see many different aspects, and we're allowed to make that choice of when and where we want to stand. Sometimes it's strategies, sometimes it's a different reason. I know when we look at history, I mean, going outside of like basketball and football, the 1968 Olympics, right? The Black Power salute. Didn't, right? You stand up for things and you might lose rights, you might lose abilities, you might lose those claim to fames. And, making that stand, you're making a choice for a big detriment. You're making a choice for a target on your back. So we see historically how they've used these platforms, but historically there's also been backlash. There's also been challenge. You brought up Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, during one of his fights, right? He would not, before he said that he was a part of the Muslim community, he still went by Cassius Clay and didn't claim that religion for the sake of the betterment of the people, right? It was a very political thing. And then it leaked out and he ended up doing that. They asked him to set what was it? What is it when you like fail a fight on purpose?
You throw the fight.
To the fight.
So what do y'all think about that, right? Like, yes, you can get upset that I'm not standing for this, but also, yes, if I do stand for this, I will not necessarily be in the position to help my people because of the backlash.
Yeah. I think that we have to be careful because it's a lonely road to wear that crown. You know what I'm saying? Like the crown that Muhammad Ali, even in its own respect, the crown that Colin Kaepernick had to wear. And I say we have to be careful because I know that there are a lot of athletes that give financially to grassroots efforts. There's athletes that have started their own schools, and LeBron has a school. Jalen Jalen Rose has a school. Like there are athletes that do a lot of work under the scenes.
Yeah.
They may not speak out, but I believe that they deserve credit for what they do, even if they're working in back channels. There's a lot of athletes that pour into these boys and girls clubs. I know
Mhm.
Tiger Woods will never be known as someone who spoke out as far as racism is concerned. But I know firsthand all of the work that he's done in the inner city with the First Tee program, getting black kids, exposing them to golf. Like, so
Mm-hmm.
those are like that's part of the fight too. You know what I mean? Like that's part of the fight too.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I get into golf because of Tiger Woods, and so there's more than one way to skin a cat. So there's more than one way to fight this institution of racism. So yeah, man, heavy is the head that wears the crown. But there's a lot of ways that athletes are fighting against racism in their own ways.
I'm glad you brought that up because not only Tiger Woods, but a lot of athletes have started not just schools for general education, but schools related to specific sports.
Hmm.
And I believe that their intent is to train more of us to get more of us into that sports where you just don't see many of us because the sport is too expensive or there's no places in our communities to play. So a lot of athletes are doing that kind of thing. I love that. That's their way of that's their way of fighting against historic racism.
Yeah,
Wow.
and one more just to throw in there, Steph Curry. Steph Curry like revived the golf program at Howard University, like taking money out of his own pocket to like revive, like to reintroduce that sport that is now, predominantly white, and exposing that to like an HBCU. He got that program like up and running, and they're actually doing pretty well. So there's many cases of athletes kind of working behind the scenes. Yes, they may not be on ESPN saying that, hey, racism is X, Y, and Z, but they're doing a lot of work out here.
I love that. I feel like we kind of hit all three questions in just one conversation. But I think it's like it's an overlapping piece. It's like an onion. There are many layers to what
Right.
this is. I'm going to pull into the next question, and if you have anything to add to it. But from what we've said, are there any additional challenges that Black athletes face when speaking out against racism in their respective sports? Just is there anything that we didn't mention?
Well, I think nowadays you're looking at specifically the younger athletes, and I'm thinking like collegiate athletes. Now, collegiate athletes are able to make money with the NIL money. I mean, with the
Right.
NIL deals, name, image, likeness. That's what the NIL stands for. And so now these kids are 18, 19 years old. They're representing a brand because they're making money. Like, there's a lot of kids in college had to have $1 million NIL deals, and so at a young age, now they have to be careful about what they say, what they post, and they don't want to rock the boat because people are paying into them before they're even professional athletes. And so if you're looking at it from a stand of what challenges, like, listen, you don't want to give 19-year-old me $1 million because that might have been a mistake. You might not know what I'm going to say because I wouldn't. I'm barely mature enough to do it now. I'm 46, but giving that money to a 19-year-old and telling them to conduct themselves in a manner, and and the one thing that they really probably can't speak out is of course racism, because you don't want to rock the boat because there's a lot of money going into you. So you really
Right.
got to be careful about how they handle themselves.
Especially if you're not sure that anything is going to change. This thing that I'm doing, is it going to change anything, or is it just going to cause me individual detriment? That's something to consider also, and I think that athletes have to take it into account. But I think one of the important challenges that athletes face now is that historically the system of white male dominance has brought in a practice of divide and rule. When back when back when they were starting the plantations in Hawaii, they brought in a lot of Chinese, and when the Chinese started organizing, they brought in the Japanese, right? And when the Japanese started organizing, they brought in the Koreans. When the Koreans started organizing, they brought in the Filipinos. The point was, every time people started realizing what you're doing to them, and they begin demanding their rights, or they begin demanding things, you bring in somebody else. And so I think a lot of athletes today, especially like in baseball, there's animus between African American and Latin American baseball players, because a lot of these teams have, you see these black guys. You black guys are prima donnas. Y'all are acting up. Well, watch what we do. Watch this. Watch this move. And so rather than seeing what white dominance is doing, these athletes wind up with animus against one another, rather than recognizing that there is a systemic racism problem, and they're playing out this divide and rule. If y'all are not going to act right, or if y'all are going to act in ways that we no longer want you to, or that we don't want you to, we're going to bring in other people from other countries and watch what happens.
Mm. That's good. That's good stuff. I'm gonna just shift us just a little bit because I feel like this can connect with what we're talking about. And Eddie, this goes a lot with the field that you're in. What role do sports media and commentary play in shaping public perception of race and athletes?
Oh, it plays a tremendous aspect because um, media is how you tell the story. Media
Mm,
is storytelling, and so you can create whatever story you want to create. You know, that is why a lot of people like myself uh, kind of get into this business because we want to be able to tell authentic stories. You know, yes, you have the big vehicles of the ESPNs and the Fox Sports, but those are machines. You know, those are machines, and so um, outlets that are smaller, they're able to kind of be a little bit more authentic when it comes to storytelling and telling true stories. You know what I'm saying? Um, Being able to go to an athlete's community service event and telling your people who listen to your show, hey, this athlete was in the city. You know, they were reading to kids at an elementary school
yeah.
versus seeing them on ESPN. Oh, this guy's a malcontent. He's a problem. Well, if
Mhm.
he's a problem, I just saw him working with these kids down at the shelter. You know what I'm saying? So there has to be a balance, but media plays a huge role. And if you're looking at just an example of that, if you look at the divide between the Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese
Mhm.
kind of dynamic that's
Mhm.
happening in the WNBA. You will be a blind man to see the racial undertones there. Yeah, it's not all racial, but there's a lot of racial undertones, and the
Right.
media plays into that. They play into it, and you can just tell by the articles that are written. They put things over there to trigger you, whether you're on to the right or to
Yeah.
the left,
Mhm.
and they want to get everybody fired up because the storytelling produces the numbers, but at the end of the day, it's kind of inauthentic. So it plays a huge a role in it, and you have to have ethics if you're going to be a storyteller, I believe.
That's great. I know. So I pulled up a couple because there have been a couple of stories recently that have really stood out to me in how media, I felt, downplayed it in some ways, but we also see the turn of media. So there was a um, Olympic athlete who ran, Allison Flex, and she was pregnant, and they disqualified her one year because she was pregnant. And she created this whole story as a result of that, that she took the negativity and did a full spin into it, promoted her next business. She came back later and she did all of these things, but the story that was told was that because of this, she's this, that, and the other, that she would not be successful. I also love the story recently, storytelling, as you were talking about, Asia Wilson, tongue twister, age, wow,
Asia Wilson.
Asia Wilson's the Nike campaign that was just directed by Malia Obama. When I tell you that was a storytelling that had Black women so energized, motivated, and
Mhm.
empowered, but the story of who she was before that was something very different. So I see media having two lenses, right? We
Mhm.
can look at it in one way, but when we as people of color promote it in a way that uplifts us, that empowers us, and put a spin on the negativity that's putting there, we have a loud voice as well that can get, people will buy into it. What are your thoughts?
Real quick, I just want to say I'm glad you brought up those points that you just made, because women in sports, especially African American women and other women of the global majority, they have sexism and racism to have to deal with and so there's a double whack pack, which is
Yes.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the whole Asia Wilson um that whole campaign is just awesome. And I think that just goes to show you why it is important to have people of color in
Mhm.
these storytelling places. You know, I went to school for journalism, and although I'm an educator, I still do the journalism piece. That's still a part of who I am, you know. And there have been, I cover basketball now, but there was a time that I was covering multiple sports, and there were some doors that I couldn't get into, and allegedly because I didn't have the big names behind my back like ESPN or Fox Sports. But we all kind of knew there was a reason why, some of us weren't getting in the room. You're looking at the people who are in the room, and none of those people looked like me. You put one and two together. And so it's always very important to have people of color be able to tell these stories. And even now, I've been doing this for 12 years. Whenever I see a young person that is starting out covering an event, or I'm always giving them a word of encouragement, a tips, or whatever I can offer to them. And that's just kind of like my way of just passing it down, because it's very important that we tell our stories like the way we need to be telling.
Yeah. All right. This has been a good conversation, and especially with my limited knowledge in sports. But, I think I held it down just a little bit by
Oh,
what I've seen.
absolutely. Absolutely. Can I
I'm,
say one last thing?
yes, please do. Please do.
Yeah,
I was going
last
to
thing.
say, go ahead and give your closing thoughts and also let people know how can they stay in touch with you. Go right ahead, Talani.
Okay, so there's no point in me telling you how you can get in touch with me because I'm not going to answer your email. Um, so there's no point in me putting the email out there. Tanya, she's a witness. I probably would answer your text messages, but the emails I'm not going to answer. But what I do want to say is that one of the things that we forget about dealing with racism is that we are working towards interrupting white male dominance. That is what dismantling racism is about. It is about interrupting white male dominance, right? And so let's not forget that. And we look back at all of these people who are, all of these athletes who are trying to get more of us into these sports and into these sports areas, and we have to infiltrate every area of these sports because the point is to interrupt white male dominance.
Yeah, piggybacking on what you're saying, I totally agree. It is an interruption, and not only that, it is a very uncomfortable interruption.
Yeah,
That if you're going to do it, you have to be ready for the uncomfortableness of it. And even discussions like these, we need to have white people in these discussions.
yep,
You know what I'm saying? Because we've been having these discussions of racism among ourselves for too long.
right.
Let's involve them in the conversation and see what they got to say. But as far as my contact information, I have it kind of listed under there for those who are uh, able to see the screen. But we're on all of our social media platforms. My son does a lot of my social media stuff. So whatever social media platform that you are on, Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky, the whole shebang, just type in Hawks Beat and you'll find what we're doing, and you'll be able to see the podcast. Well, it's mainly an audio podcast, so you'll be able to find my musings there. But I appreciate you for having me as well, Tanya. You're awesome.
You just reminded me I do have an Instagram thing that my granddaughter set up for me. Conrad Moore 9. It's Conrad Moore, all one word, and a 9 at the end of it.
There
All
you
right.
go. There you go.
And it's scrolling at the bottom so you all can keep in touch with everyone that we have here. I appreciate you all coming out and joining in this conversation because we know whether we're talking about Flojo or Shakari Richardson, whether we're talking about Muhammad Ali or Colin Kaepernick, we want to make sure that we are writing stories that really promote who we are. And regardless of what the background of it is, we want to make sure that we're uplifting people of color. We're uplifting and dismantling racist systems that are set and designed to hold us down and to keep us from growing and elevating. So thank you all for joining us today. And thank you all for joining us in listening. If you're listening now or if you're listening later, go ahead and drop a comment and continue the conversation. This has been Racism is Real, and we look forward to seeing you next month.
That's all for today's conversation on Racism is Real. Thank you to our incredible guests for sharing their insights, and thank you for tuning in. Remember, awareness is the first step. but action is where the change happens. If you found today's discussion valuable, this series will return every second Tuesday evening. Also, be sure to check out our website and follow us for more information and topics like these. And consider making a donation to support our work. Together, we can challenge systems of oppression and work toward a more just future. See you next time.